Welcome to Ignite Your Confidence for women in leadership who want to speak up and stand out. I'm your host, Karen Laos. Here you'll get all of the tips and tools that you need to stand out with unshakable confidence. Let's dive into today's episode. Hi, and welcome to Ignite Your Confidence. Specifically, today's episode is on 3 tips to promote yourself with ease. First of all, let's talk about what promoting yourself even means, because there are so many people that I talk to that say they hate talking about themselves. They hate, and I'm doing air quotes now for those of you listening, promoting themselves and self-promoting. And sometimes, first of all, I want to clear up any confusion around this in the first place, because what I believe has happened is many of us are looking or listening to that phrase as something bad. Oh, if I promote myself, that means that I'm bragging, or that means that I'm going to sound arrogant, or the opposite of humble, and all of the above. In my opinion, self promotion is simply sharing about who you are and what you do with the world. If we think about it that way, as opposed to waving that flag going, pick me, I'm so great, aren't I amazing? Of course, that is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about having the confidence to own who you are and what you do and be able to communicate that into the world so that a person can decide, do I want to do business with this person? Do I want to hire this person? And I can remember many years ago when I started my first coaching practice after leaving the corporate world the first time. My background is in human resources. What I did as my focus was career coaching in the beginning. And yet, I didn't want to exclude anybody. So many of you, of course, know what that's like. Do you niche down? Do you not? Do you make it available to everybody? But I will tell you the mistake that I made is that even I can remember now my business cards at the bottom said career, life, business coaching. Now, if you think about that, it sounds great as far as, oh, anybody. But the bigger problem is nobody knew how to refer people to me. I could talk about what I did and who I was, all I wanted, but I also wasn't clear on who my target audience was and what I was actually doing for them. So that was one of those examples where I was pretty comfortable promoting myself and talking about who I am and what I do, but nobody quite knew how to help me. So there's an art to it as well. I want to give you 3 specific tips as to how you can do this. The first one is to ask yourself, why is this so hard? If in fact it is. And I'm talking to most people who are listening to this. Generally speaking, most people talk about, especially women that I work with, say it's really challenging to promote myself. And that is why I'm asking you to ask yourself this question. What is so hard about it and why? If you can get to the root of that, because like most things in life, 80% of it is mindset. 80% of it is related to how we believe in ourselves. And the rest of it, that 20% is skill, is practice, all of the above. But if we can identify what it is that's preventing us from either believing in ourselves or feeling able to do it, that's going to help us get past it. So, my suggestion is to first take some time and ask yourself some of those questions around why it's so hard. And then to figure out what is the biggest message of self doubt that you say to yourself. So, for example, I have a client who says, I feel like, in fact, I have a couple of clients that say this. I question whether what I have to say is valuable to anybody. So, what does that actually say at a deeper level? My bigger question then to you and anybody else listening is, would it be possible that what you're really saying or feeling is, am I valuable? Do I make a difference? And if we can get to the root of what the issue of that self doubt is, then we can name it. We can become more aware of it clearly through that process, and then we can determine how to move past it. So, for example, let's say you might feel that same way. Does what I have to offer or does what I have to say add any value to anybody? And that is a very important question to ask yourself because, first of all, number one, yes, every single one of you listening has value and has something to offer someone in the world. The bigger question then is, how do you determine how to get past that. And so here's a tip. First, you figure out that self-doubt message. And then, excuse me, there's something in my mouth. Okay. And then that leftover chocolate toffee from earlier. Shh, don't tell anybody. No, just kidding. No shame in that. No shame in that. I digress. Figure out your self-doubt message. Maybe it's something like, I don't add value. Then, or I question whether I've add value. Here's the antidote. So here's the other thing I would then suggest is figure out something that you could say that would counteract that. For example, people love to hear what I have to say. Or maybe it's, I add value to so many lives. Now that may feel at first like, ooh, am I bragging? What is that feeling like? It doesn't matter right now. The point is to start saying that new phrase because you want to continue to do that so you can affirm yourself. Mindset is so important. And what we think and what we focus on and what we say to ourselves is what we become. So you've got to focus on where you want your energy to go. So anytime you catch yourself saying that message of self-doubt or hearing that creep into your head, immediately have that opposite message at the ready to say back. And simply naming it out loud is extremely helpful because it in part separates you from that self-doubt message. It's similar to fear. If you've got, well, it's very, very similar, self-doubt and fear. If you think about what is it that I'm afraid of, you name it, and then it enables you to feel a little bit separate from it. And I'm not a therapist, but I certainly have heard about narrative therapy, and that is very common in narrative therapy where you name it. So you're ultimately giving it a different narrative. So that's tip one, identify your self-doubt message and then come up with a statement that will counteract that. Let's move on to, no, before step two, I want to tell you another thing, a few things to think about to further solidify that confidence, that self-assuredness in who you are. Here are some questions to ponder. What I'm most proud of is this. What that demonstrates about me is this. My best quality is, and that brings me to number two, tip number two. Why is what you do or who you are helpful to others? Ask yourself that question and answer it. For example, what is it that you do that's in service to other people? And if you can focus on that, then we're more likely to tell someone about it. If I know that I can help somebody speak better on a TEDx stage or have more confidence to speak up in a meeting, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do everything I can to tell someone I can help you. Now, obviously, you have to have a level of confidence to be able to say that. But this is all what this is about. It's practicing. It's thinking, how can I be in service to other people? How can I share that that is something that I could help with? So much of this is just in line with the same thing that I always talk about is speaking up. And how can you step into that confidence so that you can help someone else? So that would be what I'd suggest. Every single person is wearing an invisible antenna on their head that says with them, what's in it for me? The abbreviation, what's in it for me? If we can get better at communicating our messages to other people with our listener in mind, with what they care about, that is going to make a massive difference in the message that we deliver because it's going to be relevant to someone else. Here's another side tip for you. Many of you already know this, but I want to reiterate, when you're posting on Instagram or on Facebook and you're in a business or you're wanting to serve your audience, don't just say, oh, look at the fun meal I had, or, oh, look at the great city that I live in, which I tend to say a lot. But you want to make sure that if you're going to say that, then you position it to why this matters to your listeners. Why should they care where you live? Well, you can spin it to, I love my city. What do you love about yours? Or I just had this amazing meal. What are you doing this Saturday night to celebrate? Something like that. It's getting in the mindset of constantly thinking about how can I be of service to others. That's number 2. Number 3, I want to give you some sentence prompts for those of you that want some help with what do I actually say? How do I say this? Whether you are in a current company talking about what you do, or whether you are an entrepreneur and you're simply delivering your message or saying what you do. And let's just face it, that question when people say, what do you do? It throws a lot of us. So I always recommend that you are ready at any moment, not just to introduce yourself, which, as some of you already have heard on previous podcasts, or if you've heard me anywhere else that I'm talking, I talk about this PPU method. Say something personal, professional, and unique. That's another model that you could use. I'm not going to focus so much on that right now, but that is a great model to be ready to do an introduction. What I want to focus on is a more standard elevator pitch. So if you think about promoting yourself beyond simply saying, here's who I am, here's what I do, I want to give you this formula. So I'm going to give you 2 of them. And the first one I learned from Donald Miller specifically. I love him. He is my mentor, and he doesn't know that he's my mentor, but he is. And what he talks about is identifying the problem first. And it's interesting because I remember him talking about being at a party, or maybe he was telling a story about this. So don't hold me to this being true. But the truth is that he did tell this story. And it was imagining you're at a dinner party, people are going around saying, well, what do you do? And you know how it is at a party, or it's been a long time since any of us have probably been to a party because of COVID. But if you can remember, you talk to somebody, you say, what do you do? They answer, you both walk away. Your friend at the wine bar or at the hors d'oeuvre table says, oh, what do they do? And you say, I don't know. And you just continue eating your hors d'oeuvres. This is the problem. Most of us don't speak in a way that's very memorable. And that's why so many messages are boring and uninteresting. So I want you to be able to be memorable and stand out. And the story that he talks about is 2 personal chefs, both at a party. One comes up to you and says, and they say, you say to them, well, what do you do? And the first one says, I'm a personal chef. And then that's about it. The other one says, well, you know how sometimes when you come home from a long day at work and you and your husband and kids are trying to figure out what the heck are we going to eat tonight? And that happens time and time again. The person says, yes, I do know what that's like. Well, I take the guesswork out of that for you. And I'm a personal chef who creates menu plans and meals, or specifically cooks for you. So notice how different that is. And really what you're doing is you're simply starting with the problem and identifying how you will solve that problem for them. So here's the prompt, and then I'm going to give you the example from my line of work. It sounds like this. You know how, and then in blank, person and problem. Well, I help them to solution. So that's I know it's a little weird to say it in print. I'm going to repeat it and then I'll give you an example. You know how, person and problem. I help them to solution. Here's how it sounds in a normal sentence. You know how women often hold back from sharing their ideas? I help them to overcome self-doubt and speak with confidence. That is one option. Another prompt is, I work with person who struggles with pain, and I help them to instead pleasure. So clearly, again, sounds a little weird. I work with person who struggle with pain and help them to instead pleasure. Here it is in a sentence. I work with high achieving women who struggle with confidence and help them to instead speak up, be seen as influential, and get promoted. There you go. That's what it could sound like. So I hope that those tips are helpful for you. I'm assuming that they are, because I know that they've worked for me, and they've worked for other people in my life, especially my clients. I want to repeat these for you so that you have them all lined up. First tip, identify your self-doubt message, and then find the opposite sentence to counteract it. Number two is determining why it is what you do helpful to others. Why is it? Who do you serve? How can you be helpful to others? So what is it that you do and why is that helpful to others? Number three, these 2-sentence prompts that I gave you. I'm not going to repeat them because that's a lot of words, but a couple of models there for you to give you essentially a prompt that makes it a no-brainer to start talking about this. Now, all this aside, one last bonus tip for you is just to start talking about who you are, what you do. Make it easy on yourself. If you want to simply start, I mean, obviously formulas are very helpful. That's why I'm giving them to you. But if sometimes the issue is more speaking up at all or feeling like, oh, who am I? Why would somebody want to listen to me? Well, I'm telling you, because you do have value. Your story is important. And the key is for you to believe it, step into it. And the only way that you can do that is to start. Start with one person in the next week. Tell them about who you are and what you do. And here's another idea, why you do it. Why is it that you do this? Personally, why do I help women? Because I'm on a mission to eradicate self-doubt and help every woman step into her confidence and be unshakable. That is why I do what I do. Going deeper, it's because it took me too long to find my voice, and I want to help other women do the same. I want to end with a story that some of you may have heard before, but it's when I wanted to move into training role. As a boy, even almost as a kid, I mean, I didn't really know what corporate training was as a kid, but in college, I certainly did. And I had a dream to travel all over the world and train people on these amazing skills like communication. Well, I had to think, okay, how do I get started? How do I do this? I ended up through a variety of circumstances working at the Gap in their corporate office. I wasn't even in a training role, but I was managing a portion of a call center and a team there. The company asked if anybody wanted to volunteer to do trainings for new hire orientation, and I jumped at the chance. It was a volunteer opportunity. I say this because I had a blast doing it, but I had only truly had a few hours of experience when a woman I knew from a networking group came to me and said, hey, we have a job as an HR director and I'd love for you to interview. So I interviewed. And by the way, quick side note, I have lots of weaknesses, but one of them is not self-promotion. In other words, I've always been pretty confident. I'm that woman that says, I don't care if I only have 2 out of 10 qualifications. I'm going to go for the job anyway and see what happens. So I went to this interview and I focused so much of that interview on what I loved doing, which is training. Now, granted, I only had a few hours of experience, but I was so focused on how much I loved training. I was ultimately promoting myself through my passion. I wasn't thinking about, oh, I'm going to try to act like I've had all kinds of training. No, I didn't lie. I simply said, I love training and I talked a lot about it and how much I love developing people. Well, I got the job. And the day after I started, the CFO comes up to me and says, Karen, I heard you've done lots of training at the Gap. I've got all my finance managers coming in from all over the world. Will you do a 2-hour training on leadership next week? And I thought, oh my gosh. Well, of course, my first answer was yes, absolutely. And then I proceeded to turn around and think, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? But it was a very exciting opportunity. I rose to the challenge. To this day, it's one of the best workshops that I've ever given. And it was a wonderful example of talking about what I'm passionate about. And you can do the same thing. People's energy is drawn to the energy that you focus it on. We have a lot more control than we think in our communication. I'd suggest you think about that the next time you're talking about who you are and what you do. And my hope and expectation is that the more you do this, the more you're going to feel comfortable promoting yourself, especially when you know promoting yourself is simply saying who you are and what you do. And bonus ad, why that matters to you and to the world and how you serve. Thank you once again for being here, and I look forward to the next episode. And that's a wrap of another episode of Ignite Your Confidence. I'm your host, Karen Laos. Thank you so much for listening. If you loved today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps other people find the podcast faster, and it certainly helps me. If you're interested in more tips and tools around confidence, please join me over in my Facebook group called Ignite Your Confidence with Karen Laos. Remember, you too can stand out with unshakable confidence.